They say fasting is simple. Just stop eating, wait long enough, and the body begins to clean itself. But human physiology is not a switch. It is a sequence. The body does not leap from breakfast to renewal in one dramatic step. It moves through layers. First, insulin falls. Then stored sugar begins to drain. The liver changes its instructions. Fat leaves its warehouses. Ketones rise like a second fuel system coming online. And only much later does fasting become the deep metabolic state many people imagine from the start. Research shows that the shift away from glucose begins within hours, but the deeper transition towards sustained ketone use and broader cellular stress responses takes much longer. And in humans, some of those later processes are still being mapped. Source is source. So what actually happens inside the body as a fast lengthens? What are these 7 levels? And why do most people never reach level 6? Level 1, the fed echo. The first level begins while food is already gone, but the body is still living on its memory. Glucose from the last meal still circulates through the bloodstream. Insulin remains elevated enough to direct that fuel into muscle, liver, and fat tissue. The digestive tract is quieter now, but the metabolic machinery is still handling incoming cargo. In this phase, the body has not entered a true fasting identity yet. It is finishing yesterday's instructions. This is why the earliest hours can feel deceptively unchanged. Energy may still seem stable. Hunger may be mild or absent. The system is still fueled by what was recently absorbed. And the liver is still partly restrained by insulin's message to store rather than release. Many people imagine fasting starts only when the stomach feels empty. Biologically, it starts earlier than that, but slowly. The body does not panic. It adjusts. It lowers one signal at a time, like dimming lights across a large building, rather than shutting off the power all at once. Source level 2. Glycogen withdrawal. Then the stored sugar begins to matter. The liver holds glycogen, a compact reserve of glucose built for the space between meals. In level 2, that reserve becomes the bridge. Insulin declines further. Glucagon rises. The liver receives a new message. Release, do not store. It begins breaking glycogen apart to keep blood glucose stable for tissues that still depend heavily on it. The source is source. This is often where the first physical signs appear. Hunger pulses. The body may feel strangely alert, then flat. A mild chill can emerge. None of this is mysterious. Fuel is being redistributed. The body is no longer living off the meal. It is living off its own reserves. And yet this phase is still ordinary biology, not metabolic magic. Glycogen is a short-term savings account, not a deep emergency vault. Once it begins to thin, the body must negotiate with a more complicated question. If outside fuel is absent, what internal tissue will now pay the bill? That question opens the next level. Level 3. The glucose negotiation level 3 is the transition few people feel clearly, but the body feels it everywhere. As liver glycogen falls, glucose still has to be maintained. Red blood cells still require it. Parts of the brain still depend on it. So the body turns to gluconeogenesis, the manufacture of new glucose from non-carbohydrate materials such as lactate, glycerol, and certain amino acids. It is a biochemical workaround, elegant but costly. Source. This is where fasting becomes more than simple food absence. It becomes resource management. Fat tissue begins releasing more free fatty acids into the blood. The liver increases its metabolic flexibility. Hormones such as glucagon, epinephrine, cortisol, and growth hormone help maintain fuel flow and preserve blood glucose. The bloodstream becomes a river carrying not just sugar, but instructions for conservation. Source. Many assume the body burns fat immediately once a fast begins. Science shows a more layered reality. While the early fast is a negotiation between sugar preservation and fat mobilization. The body does not abandon glucose at once. It protects it, stretches it, and starts building a second system beside it. That second system is level 4. Level 4, fat leaves storage. Now adipose tissue enters the story more directly. Fat cells are not passive storage bags. They are active warehouses, responding to hormonal orders. As insulin falls and counter-regulatory hormones rise, lipolysis increases. Triglycerides are broken apart. Free fatty acids leave adipose tissue and move into circulation, where muscle, liver, and other tissues can begin oxidizing them for energy. Source. This is a quieter phase than people expect. There is no dramatic internal cleansing sound, no visible transformation, just a slow change in fuel traffic. The body is becoming less dependent on incoming food and more dependent on stored substrate. Muscles increasingly use fatty acids. The liver receives more fat-derived material than before. Hunger may come in waves rather than a steady line, because hormonal signaling is now shaped as much by adaptation as by emptiness. This is also where many fasts end, not because the body has failed, but because fasting has now become physiologically noticeable. The easy hours are over. The metabolism is changing lanes. Social routine, appetite, fatigue, and habit usually interrupt the process here, before the next system fully matures. Level 5. Ketones rise. When fasting continues, the liver begins manufacturing ketone bodies. This is one of the most important thresholds in fasting physiology. Ketones are not a sign that the body is breaking down. They are an alternate fuel, built largely from fatty acids when glucose availability is falling and the liver shifts toward ketogenesis. In humans, ketone levels begin to rise within roughly 8 to 12 hours of fasting and can remain elevated as fasting continues. The metabolic switch away from glucose dominance becomes more visible around longer fasting windows. Source. This is where the mythology of fasting often begins. People speak as if reaching ketosis means the whole story has already unfolded. But level 5 is not the end. It is the beginning of a new fuel hierarchy. The brain still uses glucose, but ketones increasingly contribute. Muscles continue drawing on fatty acids. Protein use is being managed more carefully. The organism is trying to run on stored energy without dismantling itself too quickly. The machinery is more efficient now, but it is not yet deep adaptation. That is why level 6 remains farther away than most people think. Level 6. The deep switch level 6 is not an official medical category. It is a useful name for a deeper fasting state, one in which the metabolic switch is no longer emerging, but established. Here, ketone use is sustained rather than incidental. Hormonal patterns of conservation are more pronounced. The body becomes more economical with glucose and more willing to spare protein than it was earlier in the fast. Reviews of fasting physiology describe this longer state as one in which ketone bodies support a large share of oxidative metabolism, especially as fasting extends beyond the first day or two and into longer durations. The source. This is also the level often associated with cellular cleanup, but the science here requires caution. Autophagy is real biology, yet in humans the exact timing and extent of fasting-induced autophagy are still under active study. It should not be treated like a guaranteed stopwatch event. Source. Most people never reach this level for one simple reason. Most fasts end before this depth is established. They stop in the transition, in the hunger waves, in the glycogen decline, in the early ketone rise. Level 6 belongs to longer fasting than most bodies, schedules, and habits ever sustain. Level 7, the long adaptation. Beyond that lies the prolonged fast, the state in which the body is no longer improvising but enduring. By this point, metabolism has reorganized around survival. Ketones may supply a major share of fuel for many tissues. Protein sparing becomes increasingly important. The endocrine system continues adjusting to preserve function while limiting unnecessary expenditure. This is not a superhuman state. It is an ancient emergency program. Source. And the body signals it. Coldness may reflect lower thermogenesis. Acetone on the breath can reflect ketone production. Weakness can reflect reduced available glucose or overall energy strain. A quieter pulse, slower movement, or mental dullness may represent conservation, not clarity. Longer fasting can also change immune and inflammatory signaling, but those changes are complex, context-dependent, and not uniformly beneficial in every circumstance. Source. So the 7th level is not a trophy. It is the body in deep adaptation, careful, nor efficient and under prolonged biological negotiation. Fasting is often described as one event. In reality, it is a staircase. The body descends through stored sugar, climbs into fat metabolism, and only later reaches the deeper state many people imagine at the very beginning. Most never reach level 6 because most fasts do not last long enough for the deeper switch to fully settle. The biology turns before the mythology does. Understanding the body is the first step to respecting it. Health is not sudden, it is cumulative.